In the fall of 2000, Britney Spears was arguably the most famous person on the planet. Her first two albums sold a combined 47 million copies worldwide. Her second album, Oops, I Did It Again, was released in May of that year, and by the fall, she was preparing to release her third single from that album. But she took a slight detour to record a Christmas song. This is the story of My Only Wish This Year.
Behind the Christmas Hits with Drew Savage.
To tell the story, we're joined by Josh Schwartz, who co-wrote the song, My Only Wish This Year, with his partner, Brian Kirolf. He joins us from his office in New Jersey. Thanks for being on the show, Josh.
No, my pleasure.
Before we get into the details of the song, I just want to kind of reset what was happening in the lay of the land for that time period. You and your partner, Brian Kirolf, had written songs for Aaron Carter, like Aaron's Party. Aaron was Britney's label mate at Jive Records. And Jive, for those who don't know, was an absolute powerhouse record label in the late 90s and early 2000s. NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Britney, Aaron Carter, all the biggest pop stars at the time seemed to be on Jive Records. What was that environment like in the late 90s?
Signing to Zomba was the greatest thing. So Zomba was the parent company. It's a South African word because the owner is South African. I don't know what it means, but Clive Calder was a great guy. I signed there in 1999 with Brian, and we immediately were put to work by the A&R guy, Steve Lunt, who you see his name on a lot of Britney stuff because he was like the primary A&R for her back in those days.
A&R stands for Artist and Repertoire. These were kind of the guiding forces for the artists on a record label.
But it was amazing because it was like, at least it was what I pictured as the Brill Building maybe was like.
That was the famous building in New York City where all of those songs from the Great American Songbook era were written.
You had a studio on one floor, you had publishing on another, you had record label on another, and it was just constantly upstairs, downstairs, upstairs, downstairs. A&Rs were popping in on the sessions. Sometimes that was cool, sometimes it wasn't, but if it was somebody who knew what they were talking about, we welcomed them in the sessions. In this case, Steve Lunt was the A&R guy, but he is a songwriter. He was a songwriter. He wrote She-Bop. He wrote Goonies Are Good Enough. He wrote all these hits in the 80s. Wow. So he was an A&R guy, but he spoke to songwriters properly because he understood songs. So he was really easy to work with, more so than some of the other A&R guys who didn't know how to play any instruments or didn't really know anything about music. They would describe things that were just ridiculous. Could you make it more... And they give you some stupid metaphor like blue. Could it be more blue? Could it be more whatever they were talking about? But Steve happened to be an excellent A&R guy. My favorite to this day. We're still dear friends. And he was able to explain what he was looking for to us much better than most.
So a name you already mentioned, Clive Calder, one of the top dogs at Jive Records, Barry Weiss, another. The way I understand it is that these guys were the ones that had the idea to put together this Christmas album of original songs featuring all of their biggest artists. It would be the album that would go on to be called Platinum Christmas. This wasn't a charity project like a lot of multi-artist albums were. This was pure capitalism. When did you first hear of the Platinum Christmas project?
They came to us, I think it was Eric Beale, who was the publisher at Zomba at the time. It was him and Steve were like working together very closely. So that's what was so great about the environment. Your publisher and your A&Rs, they're all working together. He said, do you have any Christmas song ideas? I was like, we have a couple, of course. And he said, could you come up with something for Britney? They're looking for something for Britney for this compilation record. It should be pretty cool. And we were like, oh yeah, we're in, let's do it. So we heard about it at some point in 2000, probably in the summer, and they recorded the album in the fall of 2000. And then they were able to get it mixed and done. And you got a lot of big people on the album. Again, Joe, Whitney, you had, was it Mary J. Blige was on there? Jars of Clay.
Were on this album as well.
It was crazy.
Names, and not all of them were Jive artists. Many of them were, but as you mentioned, Britney, rather not a Jive artist at that point, but they were just able to pull all of these artists together. When you and Brian was My Only Wish This Year, was that a nugget of an idea that you two already had? How did you decide on that would be the one that you'd kind of flesh out and would be right for Britney?
That was, we created that specifically for Britney. When we sat down to come up with a Christmas song, we were like, oh, everybody's going to be submitting pop Christmas songs that sound like the sound of the time. Backstreet, NSYNC, Britney, Christina. whatever was hot at the time. So we decided the smart thing to do was to get out of our studio. We had a studio at the time. The studio was in one of my house. I think it was at my house in way South Jersey. We ended up moving to the city a year or so later. But I had an old piano in the dining room in that particular house. So we said, you know what? Let's go to the piano, get out of the studio, and not think beat, not think, track. Let's just think like a songwriter like Phil Spector, like old school 60s, like a shuffle. And that was just how we created the song, was just song, no track. And Brian started playing that, and we started coming up with it. And the funny thing is it started out as sad. The melody was the same right off the bat. The da 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 da, all that was the same. But the original tag was like, Santa, please don't break my heart this year, right? Oh. And it was this sad. It was. I have the demo with like me singing it terribly, by the way. But we had to put it down so we could send it to Steve, and we kept going back and forth. I remember sending that to Steve or playing it for him. I can't remember. It was, again, this is like 25 years ago. And Steve said in his usual abusive English, accent, it's so great. That's why I love him. He's like, that's so sad. It's Christmas. What are you doing? Like, he was just, can you do something? Can you come up with a different lyric? This is sad. We don't want a sad. We want a happy Britney. It's Christmas. So we were like, okay. We went back to the drawing board, and then My Only Wish, came out within a couple of minutes, I think. Santa, that's my only wish this year. And it's just boom. We're like, okay, maybe I don't know enough about, my partner had a better grasp, certainly, of what Christmas should feel like, because he was Catholic and I was Jewish. So, we're going in there, my background was a little different, let's just say. So, but I know Christmas music.
And look, some of the greatest Christmas hits of all time have been written by Jewish songwriters. So
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And on that same album, my good friend Andrew Fromm has a great song on that album. So we did it. And then when we rewrote the lyric, we sent it in, and I remember Steve liking it a lot. And then we remember not hearing anything. And I think one of the guys from Zomba, it might have been Eric Beale at the time, called and said, you guys, listen, they love it. They want to use it. Can you fly to LA such and such a week to record it? And we're like, yeah. And we're like, wait, with Britney? And they're like, yeah, she's gonna be in town recording a video. I think it was for Stronger at the time. So it was pretty early on in her career when we did this. It was like a year or two into her massiveness, right? She came out in 98, maybe 99.
Yeah, this was the third. So Stronger was the third single from the second album. So she had already had a couple of hits off this one. Stronger was obviously another huge hit. But I read that she literally was up all night shooting the video for that song and then rolled into the studio with you the next morning to record My Only Wish this year.
That's exactly right. She just came straight in from the video set. And to get someone's vocals, that's tough, especially after an all-nighter. But she nailed it. We did it over in Hollywood. We asked them if they had any Christmas decorations laying around. So one of the engineers and the interns that were there got some lights, wrapped the microphone stand in Christmas lights just to vibe it up, because I think it was October or maybe it was September. It was in there. Mm-hmm. So we met her. She walked in, and we were like, oh God, wow. You feel her like coming in from behind you, and you're like, oh God, please don't mess this up. That's all you're thinking, because we're newer writers at the time. We were signed for maybe like a year, and she was the biggest artist in the world. So she walks into the studio, and she was like the coolest chick ever. So it made it so much easier. Like the most down to earth, the most cool, not a diva in the least. Like whatever we needed, she was a trooper. We got it done. And then we went back to New York and edited it. I think we got a couple of background singers to come in while we were in LA, like Jennifer Carr, very popular singer. She does a ton of studio work in those days, especially. And she matches up with Britney really well. I think Audrey Martels might have sang on that, who now sings with the new Chic with Lionel Rogers. She's I think she's the lead vocalist with Nile now. She was an amazing singer too. So we had them on the background. You could hear them because we didn't want to flood it with Britney. Britney's voice is so unique and it sticks out and it sits on top that if you do multiples of Britney's, it's going to be a wall. It's too much. So you needed a little air in there. But what we did was we got that and then went back to New York and we mixed, finished it up and mixed it. But when they told us, we were just like, whoa. That's cool. We didn't know it was going to come out. It wasn't like a single or anything. It's just one of those things that it's an album cut, but the album cut went platinum. and then the album went a couple times platinum, which is wild for a song that was never like an official single, right? You know that more than I do, being in radio.
Yes, it's sometimes people make songs a hit, and that was not what the executives had in mind when they first put together the album. Something else becomes a hit, different from what they had thought. And the album came out, I think, about 6 or 7 weeks after you recorded it. Have you ever had a faster turnaround time from a recording session to a song or album release?
It's possible. I think Aaron Carter was pushed pretty fast because we had a huge hit with Aaron's Party. And then they came to us and said, give us something like that again. We need something cool. So we came up with How I Beat Shaq. They're silly songs, but I didn't think they were going to work. We thought it was corny because we were like 25-year-old dudes from New Jersey. And we're like, wait a minute, we are corny. We're from New Jersey. Like it's perfect. So Aaron kind of blew up. And I think the first single came out and did really well, which was the party song. And then the guys at Jive said, listen, it might have even been Clive. He's like, I can get Shaquille O'Neal to be in a video if you guys could come up with something with him, something cool like that. So we wrote, the idea for him beating him in basketball. It just became a silly little song. Because what do you really do with a 12-year-old little kid like that? Like, it's got to be fun. So, and it worked out really well with him. But that was really quick too. So, but I think, yeah, you might be right. It might have been the Britney. It might have been the Britney one because that happened really fast.
A really quick turnaround. What in terms of the recording session itself? You said that Britney was super cool and awesome to work with. Did she come with an entourage? Like, what did it take a long time to get through the recording process? What specific memories of the recording session do you have?
I do have a terrible memory of the computer crashing. Couple times we had a virus. I remember that. That was terrifying. But no, she doesn't roll deep like that. She always had either Mo, Rob, or Q. Those were the three bodyguards at the time that I remember. Big Rob was the most famous one. You see him with a lot of celebrities. Even today, I think he was with the Jonas Brothers. You see him out there. You can't miss him. He's a mountain. Guy's massive. Q was like the smaller one, but probably very dangerous. He was smaller, but you're not a small bodyguard if you're not dangerous. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And she always traveled with this absolute sweetheart woman named Felicia Collada. She was from Louisiana. She knew the family really well. And I guess she was like an older sister, second mother to Britney. Sophie was always there. Sometimes you'd see Larry Rudolph, who was a good friend of ours too at the time. He was the manager, and we knew him really well. He was a great guy too. I'm lucky. I don't have that many I have some bad stories, but not that many. Most of the people I was around were awesome people. Like, to this day, I still, chat and say hi. I'm just out of the business, but I see these things now surfacing, these terrible situations, right, left and right. And I'm like, oh, we weren't involved with them. Thank God. I'm like, look at this. This is a mess. Like, we had a pretty good time. I mean, I was horrified what happened to Aaron. I spoke to him yearly just to touch base and say hi. I didn't know anything was wrong. And then about 2 years ago, I guess he had drowned in a tub. So that was not to digress your Christmas show to that. But the business is interesting like that. We just lucked out. But Britney, I will say, we've probably recorded 20 songs with her. But the Christmas one, we did a bunch on the third album because the relationship was forged that day. And then on the fourth album, we did a couple on the In the Zone album too. And she was never anything but cool as hell.
That's really great. Josh, I think you may have touched on this earlier, but the idea that maybe the record company didn't see this song as being a hit, does that explain why there was no music video ever filmed? Because Britney Spears in the year 2000 doing a Christmas song and then a Christmas music video, I mean, that just seems like $1 million idea.
I don't know. We talk about that to this day. Like, if that had a Mariah type video, looking, as adorable as she was, running around in the snow or whatever they could come up with, like, the song would have been way bigger. I think it took on a life of its own later because it's one of those things that I wrote 25 years ago. Brian and I wrote 25 years ago, and I walk around the mall and I hear it, and it's crazy. CVS, wherever I go, it's
I was going to say,
ubiquitous.
You must have had all kinds of those experiences. You're grocery shopping and you just, you're hearing Bing Crosby, White Christmas or something in the background, and then you're just going about your business, and then boom, there's your song right alongside.
It is It's so cool. It really is. I do have to say to this day, I love knowing that something we worked on. I can only speak for myself. Brian's not here, but knowing that something we worked on like that is part of somebody's tradition every year. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything cooler as a writer to like be a part of something. Like the reason I got into music originally was because it took me somewhere else. Like I listened, it's a time machine. I hear a song, something silly like Final Countdown, which is an amazing song. And I think exactly what age I was. I know exactly where I was. I know what I was doing. Or the Beastie Boys. I remember being on the boardwalk when I was 11 and we all knew the words to Paul Revere. Like it's a time machine, man. And I think that's what made me want to be a songwriter. But knowing that I've contributed even a little bit to that for someone else, that's really cool. That's really special. I think I'm sure Brian would feel the same way.
And I mean, you guys had such an accomplished career together as songwriters. As you mentioned, you've went on to do a ton of other stuff with Britney. You wrote for Lady Gaga. You wrote for 50 Cent. You've written for all kinds of big artists whose names we know. Where does the success and legacy of this song kind of fit in on that list of musical accomplishments for you?
Where does it fit in? It's my favorite. I know it's my wife's favorite song. My wife is like that. That's my favorite thing you've ever done. And the reason why is when we were editing it, she was upstairs. I think she might have been over at I don't even think we were married at the time. She was in the house somewhere and she heard us. She was, if I hear that piece of the song one more time, I am going to light up. Like, I can't, because when you're producing, you don't think about it. You just go back and change the snare. All right, add a little high, add a little mid, whatever it is you're doing, you're listening to the same thing over and over and over and over. And to a normal person that's not a psychopath producer like us, trying to fine tune something, they're just hearing the same thing over and over and over, and they go nuts. So she's like, I'm putting headphones on. I can't hear this anymore. And now she's very proud of it when she hears it. But the funny thing is she was in a store at the mall not long ago, and it was on, and the girl was ringing her up and singing along with it. I think it was a couple of years ago. And she was like, oh, my husband actually wrote this song. And they're like, okay, whatever, crazy lady. Like, because who makes that up? My daughter, too. If she mentions it to somebody, they're like, no, yeah, all right, whatever. You're a psychopath. So I gave up. I don't, my inner circle, some people know that I did that. And some people just have no idea, but that's okay. It's like, it did what it was supposed to do. It would have been really cool if it was a video. I agree. But I think it's taken a bit of a life of its own. Like a couple of people covered it over the last couple of years. It does keep coming back out, which is really wild. It's become a culty pop, I guess a pop classic. I wouldn't call it, we're not Bing Crosby here, but it is cool that it's in the company of that on so many compilations.
And it is a Christmas song that makes people feel good. They hear it, it comes on the radio, and people just turn it up because it makes people feel good.
I love that.
Just before we wrap up our conversation, and Josh, really appreciate the time today.
Sure.
In the 25 years since you first did this song, wrote this song, worked with Britney Spears on this song, and then worked with Britney on other songs afterwards, obviously a lot has happened in her life, and I know that you have said you're not in the business actively any longer. But as somebody removed who knew her professionally reasonably well and worked with her a number of times then and only had good experiences, what's been your take with what you've seen in recent years?
I mean, I feel like she might have been taken advantage of. I'm not in contact with her. I'm sure I could if I called somebody in her circle. I'm sure I still have contacts, but it looks like she's just been taken advantage of quite a bit. I never saw an ounce of anything out of the ordinary. I think it seemed to hit I don't know if precipice is the right word, but when everybody got fired, when that circle broke of really good people, which would have been sometime after the fourth album. I think it was, I can't remember his name, the dude she married, Federline and whatever. It started to, I'm guessing, again, I can't speculate. I adore her. So she was always so nice to us. I don't know what went on. I met Justin a bunch of times when they were dating because that was right in there. And he was, because he's like handsome and talented, you want to not like him, but he's like the coolest guy. Like he remembers your name from like 6 months prior. You're like, how do you meet like 1,000 people a day? Yeah. But he was really friendly. You just get to be around people. You just get used to it. And then they just become it becomes a normal environment to be around her. And she's kind of simple. Like, I just want a Starbucks or I want to, she's just a pretty laid back girl, very Southern. It comes right out of her when she's comfortable. But I don't know what went on. I really don't. I feel bad. I hope she's okay, and I hope she's going to come out of this on the right side of everything. I don't like seeing her like this, or whatever I'm seeing. I don't know. I think a lot of it might be media too, and maybe she's playing along. She is pretty smart, so
she is very savvy. There's no question about that. Well, Josh, thank you for the time, and thank you for writing with Brian this great Britney Spears song that we can enjoy every year at the holidays. My only wish this year. Thanks for being on this episode of Behind the Christmas Hits.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm Drew Savage. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Instagram at Drew Savage on air. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave us a review or a rating, or maybe even suggest a topic or song you'd like to hear us cover on a future episode. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a story behind the Christmas hits.